Purple. Hey guys, welcome back to Happy Tech. In this video I'm going to build an FPV 5-inch racer. I'm going to use this frame which is Relay CC Purple 215. It's a little bit outdated, but for my second build that I'm going to shoot the video of, I think this frame is pretty good, and generally it was quite cheap, like 20 bucks from Banggood. The pros of this frame, all the electronics, it's kept well protected inside the fuselage, and the thickness of the bottom plate is quite good. It's around 4 millimeters, which is great, and generally you can bash this quad. Also, the camera, FPV camera, is quite protected, because when you crash the quad in this way, you will not damage the camera. But if you hit camera like hard on the wall or like some branch or a tree directly, probably you will break the lens. But all the electronics inside will be pretty good protected. The downside of this frame is that you must do like quite a tight build to put everything inside the frame. I saw the video where some of the guys put the receiver on top of this frame. That's also the option, but generally my plan is not to do that. Generally this is not my first quad that I'm gonna build. I already built my first quad, but it was not live, so it was not like I didn't make a video of it, but I'm flying it, and this quad looks like this. Here it is. So it's beautiful. I call it Happy Red. This quad is based on Martian 2 frame, Majk OSD flight controller, Ishin VTX, Racer Star, I don't know, I cannot remember the name, Racer Star Racing Edition BR2205 Pro motors, etc. And generally it flies great. It's a little bit heavy, but since this is my first quad, I started to learn FPV flying with it. Guys, sorry for interruption, just one small information I would like to share with you. Since this video will be quite long, almost 1 hour long, I divided it into the parts and assigned each part a timestamp. So therefore, in order to enable the easier browsing through the video, you can find below in the description a timetable with all parts of the video, and from there you may choose which part of the video you would like to watch. So that's that. Enjoy the rest of the quad build. This will be framed for my second quad, and I'm going to build it and shoot a video about it. Beside the frame, the other components that I will use for this build, it will be the flight controller. This is all-in-one flight controller from Majk. Is the F405 CTR. Generally it's a great flight controller with a lot of functions. Besides flight controller, I'm going to use the Fire Phoenix motors, R-Vector motors from Fly. These motors were pretty cheap from AliExpress, like for 35 bucks. So 4 of them. For the receiver, I'm going to use this small receiver from FR Sky. It's the XSR-E receiver. It supports smart port, and you connect it through the S-Bus. For the VTX, I'm going to use this Ishin TX805 VTX that supports the power from 25 milliwatts to 800 milliwatts. So generally you can use it also for the long range. And last but not least, I'm gonna use this FPV camera. It's a Foxeer Monster 16:9 widescreen, and it will provide 1200 TV lines. And generally this camera, it's quite big for this frame, but I hope it will fit nicely and will give me a nice and clear FPV footage. Okay, let's put everything to the side and prepare the work table for the build. Okay guys, I'm back. I prepared the workbench for the build and I forgot to mention that I will use the Flycolor 30 ampere Raptors ESC in this build. The idea of this build is to use the stack of flight controller, and on top I will use this VTX, and this receiver will go probably on top or somewhere on the side, so everything will be well protected inside the frame. Okay, let me put the flight controller first. Generally it doesn't matter how you will rotate the flight controller, because this frame is symmetric from front to back and vice versa. Okay, just put the flight controller like this. You don't need to screw anything, just for now. And there's the port. Generally I'm using the screws with countersunk head, because I don't have the screws with round head that will be enough long to support my stack. But eventually maybe I will change them, but for this build I think that they will be quite good. Okay, let me zoom a little. First of all, I need to do the thinning of the pads that I'm going to use. Let me first start from the camera. So this is the front of the flight controller, and this is the front of the quad, as the arrow suggests. So this Foxeer Monster has the VCC from the left to the right. It's VCC, ground, video, audio, OSD, ground, and V sensor. VCC and ground is for powering the camera. Video is video out from the camera, audio out, also OSD and ground for the camera adjustment. You are using it with this remote control. Generally you connect this remote control to this small connector. And the interesting thing is this camera supports the voltage on screen. Generally you can put this VSAN cable wherever you like on your flight controller, from where you want to read out the voltage. Generally you should solder it to the VBAT, directly to the battery voltage, and it will give you the readings in your OSD. But that is not important in this build, because this flight controller already supports OSD, so this is not important. So VCC and ground, VCC and ground from the camera, I will solder to 5 volts and ground. 5 volts is the BEC output from the flight controller. The video will go to the cam, and that's that for the camera. And as I mentioned, you can solder the VSAN. You can solder VSAN directly to the VBAT if you want, but you don't need to do that, because already you have supported OSD from this flight controller. Okay, that's about the camera. Next, let's check out which pads we need to use to solder the TX805 VTX. So this VTX supports smart port and pit mode. 5 volts and ground you will use if you want directly to power the camera from the VTX. Video, it's the video out of the VTX. Ground, and 7 to 24 volts is to power up the VTX. So in order to connect the VTX to the flight controller, I will use next pads. So first VBAT and ground to power up the VTX. VTX for video out, so generally it will be video out from the camera, and for the video in for the VTX. And for the smart port I will use pad TX3. Okay, perfect. That's for the camera and for the VTX. Let me see about connecting the XSR-M receiver. So it has these two wires, black and red, are ground and 5 volts, I think. Next, there are orange and blue wires. Orange wire is S-bus and blue wire is smart port. So I'm gonna power this receiver from the following pads on the flight controller. First, to power up the receiver, I'm going to use these two pads, 4V5 and G, which means like 4.5 volts and ground. 4V5 will give me from 4.4 to 4.5 volts. And to connect the S-bus, I'm going to use the S-bus pad. And to connect the smart port, I'm going to use TX2. About the ESCs, it's very easy. For each ESC you have two powering pads on the side, like minus and plus. These big pads for one ESC. To control the ESC you are using the pad S, so you have S4, S2, S1 and S3. And this board supports also the telemetry for the BL Heli 32. And if you have appropriate ESCs, unfortunately I don't have that kind of ESCs, you can solder that telemetry wire to the RX pad beside S pads for the ESCs. Okay, and generally that's that. Now I'm going to do the thinning of all the pads that I mentioned. For the soldering purpose, I'm going to use the soldering iron TS100, which is amazing soldering iron that you can power up from the batteries if you have this style of connector, like from the XT60 to this kind of port, or generally you can power it up from the laptop charger that I'm doing right now. Okay guys, I did the thinning and this is how the flight controller should look like. So I thinned all the pads I'm going to use for soldering and I'm going to use in this quad build. Okay, next thing is to solder the camera. Since I'm going to use the VCC ground and video and VSEN, I don't need so long wire and I'm going to cut it somewhere here because these connectors are not good for me. So, okay, I'm not going to use the audio, fortunately. That's why I'm going to remove that wire. You can remove the wires easily by just lifting off this plastic from the wire that you don't want to use. And then this metallic part will still be there, and generally in the future if you want to use some of these wires that you removed, you can put them back, and in my case I will be able to use the audio once again. Let me just see which one is the audio, the green one. So let's remove the green one. Just like that. It's easy. Perfect. So because the camera will be quite close, I don't need so long wires. That's why I'm going to connect this. Let me just connect it. Put the connector back. Okay, perfect. These are wires that are amazing. They are silicone wires and really nice. Okay, so this length of the wires will be quite enough. So I'm going to cut them somewhere here. So let me check once more. I'm going to use VCC, ground, video and blue one, which is the V sensor. Okay. This will be more than enough. Since these are the silicone wires, it will be easy to just like with your hands, with your nails, to remove the isolation, as you can see. Always I like to do the thinning of the end of the wires because it will keep them like not spreading apart, and it will give me much nicer soldering. Just like twist them a little bit, turn the iron on. This iron is amazing, it's heating up so fast, like from room temperature to the 350 degrees for a few seconds. Yeah, of course it depends on the power supply that you give it, but it's amazing, really. And now just like do thinning of the end of the wires. That's easy. These wires are like nice, very thin. Since I'm using this chisel tip for this iron for the first time, I'm a little bit clumsy with it, but okay, I will learn. It's amazing because it's heating up all the surface of the chisel. I'm not sure if you can see, it's heating up all the surface of the chisel, and generally there all the heat of 350 degrees is focused in the tip. Okay, that's that. Now let's go and do if some wires are too long, always you can make them short. Like maybe this ground is quite long. I'm gonna cut it. Maybe this video wire is a little bit too long. And I'm gonna cut this a little bit. Be careful not to lose like wire pieces to connect something, or okay, that's that. So let's get ready to solder. So first I'm going to solder 5 volts. It is here. I'm going to put a little bit more solder on top. Okay guys, I finished the soldering of the camera wires. Next task is to solder the VTX. Since VTX I will stack in this way, I'm going to solder the end of the wires like immediately at this end. I'm not going to cut them because maybe I will change the position VTX after time, so this length of wires will be sufficient. And generally I will need just to cut the power wires for this VTX and leave these wires this long. Okay. In order to reuse this connector, I will not cut the wires all the way to connector, but I will cut them, let's say here, somewhere here. It will be enough length for these wires. And also these wires are silicone, amazing, and I'm gonna just like remove a little bit of the silicone insulation. Preheat the iron. This red wire will go directly on VBAT, the same place that I solder the VSEN wire from the camera. The ground will go, the black wire ground will go to the ground. As I can see now that I will not need the 5 volt and ground wire because I will not power the camera from the VTX. So I'm gonna cut this red one and this black one. Generally I will not use them at all. Okay, perfect. Just remove them. Okay, perfect. I need to put a little bit of tin on top of these wires. So as I mentioned, the red wire will go directly to the VBAT. Okay, I hope I will manage to do that. Don't apply heat too long to the pad because the pad can lift off easily. Just a few seconds. and I think this is good. Just let me do once more. Nice, this is perfect. This is more than perfect. Okay, cool. Now I will solder the ground next to the bat. I put a little bit of, I hope you can see. Perfect. That's that for the power. And now I need to solder the VTX wire, which will go here. Perfect. And this is the smart port that will go to TX3. Yeah. Okay, that's that for the soldering of the VTX and the camera. I hope you can see how I did the soldering. Generally I just like reorientated the VTX wires to go in that direction because the camera wires are going in that direction, and in order not to cross them, I don't know, during the montage or something like that. Okay, the next step is to solder the receiver. Since I don't have the appropriate connector to connect this receiver connector to the flight controller, I need to cut the wires. Since I don't know where I'm going to position the receiver, I'm just gonna cut the wires here to make them long as possible. The same procedure, remove the silicone, do the pre-soldering, and solder the wires to the flight controller. So guys, now everything has been soldered, FPV camera, VTX and receiver. Now I need to do the mount of the motors, the soldering of ESCs to the motors, and after that to solder the ESCs to the board, to the flight controller. Okay, let's do that. Guys, in order to make the motor mount more simple, I just removed the flight controller and the other solder parts. These motors came in pack of 4. 2 of them are clockwise and 2 of them are counterclockwise. Generally, it's written on the box which one is which, but I mix them together. I'm going to find which is which by using the right direction nut. Okay, this is clockwise, this is obviously counterclockwise, this is also clockwise, and this should be the counterclockwise one. Nice. Okay, perfect. So this will be the front of the quad, this will be the back of the quad. So one clockwise is going here, other clockwise is going here, one counterclockwise is going here, the other counterclockwise is going here. Okay, in order to mount the motors, I will use the thread locker. You can use the Loctite or whichever, because it's always good to screws to have some kind of glue to not turn off during the flight or during the crash, etc. I bought this thread locker from the Hobby King, and generally it's a quite good thread locker. I will just show you how to apply thread locker to the one of the motors, and generally it will be the same for all the rest. So use a little bit of thread locker at the end of the screw. I hope you can see, like this, just a little bit, apply at the end. Oppa, I'm too clumsy. Just a little bit of thread locker applied at the end of the screw. Okay, that's perfect. Nice. Okay, one done, 3 more to go. Let me clean this thread locker a little bit. Okay. Or you can just like put the screw on top of the screwdriver and put the thread locker like this. Just turn it a little bit. Not too much, but quite enough. And one more. Perfect. Now just see how it, now it's perfect. Just tighten them pretty good. And that's that for this motor. Now the second, third and fourth, you can do it by yourself. Okay guys, that's that about the motors. Motors are mounted with the screws and with the thread locker. The next thing that I will need to do is to cut the motor wires to appropriate length in order to accommodate the ESCs, which later I will mount on the arms of the bottom plate of the FPV frame. Okay, let's do that. Generally you will not need so long motor wires, so you can cut them, let's say, so if I put the ESC like this, motor wires can be cut it, let's say here, because I want to bend them a little. Always leave a little bit of length of the wires, because you don't want them to if the motor breaks or something like that, you don't want them to rip up the ESC or like just like make them so, you know, like bend them a little or so. So that's why I'm gonna leave a little bit of length of the wires like that. Okay, I'm gonna cut them here like this. Okay, perfect. Now just to remove the silicone protection. Perfect. Let's thin them a little. Nice. And now you can solder them one by one to the ESC, but it will be good to pre-solder ESCs also. Put a little bit of tin on top of them. And now you can easily solder the wires to the ESCs. Nice. So that's that for the first ESC. Now I will do the rest of the ESCs and continue soldering the ESCs to the flight controller. So guys, I finished the soldering of the ESCs to the motors. As you can see, it should look like this. Let me show you up and close. The soldering should be clean, without any debris, without any damaging of the ESC. Now I need to figure it out how to do the the mounting of the ESCs to the frame. Okay guys, I found a solution how to mount the ESCs to the frame. First I put them inside the heat shrink tube, this purple one, and after that I zip tie them to the arms of the frame. In order to have some like a dumping effect, I put a little bit of the double-sided sticky tape between the frame and the ESCs. For me, this way of mounting ESC is great. It will give a minimalistic look to the quad. Next thing that I will need to do is solder the ESC's wire to the flight controller board. Okay guys, in order to solder the wires from the ESC to the flight controller board, I need to cut them to appropriate length. I already cut them, but they are just like too long. I would like to leave a little bit of the wire like this, just in case, and cut it somewhere here. Maybe it will be good to just like thread them once, like this, nice. And now I can cut this wire, let's say here, and the black one, cut it somewhere here, nice. As always, remove the isolation. These wires are pretty thick and it will be maybe a little bit harder to remove isolation, but you will be able to do it with your hands. If you cannot do it with your hands, always you can use some sharp knife or something like that. As always, I would like to pre-thin the end of the wires. Nice. And you can use tweezers, or in my case I'm using this special tweezer that it will enable you to grab the wire like this and easily to solder it on the pad. Just a moment, like this. Perfect. Okay, that's good. Now let me do the next. I will need to put a little bit more of solder to this pad, since there is not enough solder. So when you end up soldering the power wires for the ESCs to the flight controller board, you will get something like this. It's not perfect, but I think it will be good. And the last step is to solder this signal wire, yellow one to the S pad and the black one to the ground, to the thick black one. So let me do that. When you finish the soldering, it should look like this. Now I'm going to do the rest of the ESC soldering to the flight controller board. Okay guys, I finished the soldering of the ESCs. I have to admit that this is not my best soldering that I ever did, but I think it will be sufficient and it will do the job. The next thing, and generally the last thing to solder, is the XT60 connector for the battery. I have this XT60 connector with a wire pre-soldered. Generally the wire is too long, that's why I'm going to cut it somewhere here and do the soldering. Since the battery mount for this frame is from the bottom, I will solder the XT60 from the bottom, and I need to turn the other side of the frame. This is minus, this is plus. So when you cut the wires, just remove a little bit of silicone protection, like that. Put the wires inside the flight controller board, like this. Nice, something to support the board. Okay guys, I finished the soldering of the XT60, as you can see. Okay, I think it seems good, it seems sturdy, it seems nice. The last thing that I need to do is check all the soldering to be sure that everything is soldered good and that there is no some interconnection between adjacent pads. And after that I need to do the assembly. Guys, I need to apologize because during the assembly I found out that there is a little room between the flight controller board and this part of the upper frame of the quad. And that small room will not allow that this thick wire, this red wire or this black wire goes between the flight controller and the frame. So that's why I rerouted all the wires, as you can see from this side, red and black, and also at the front of the quad I rerouted the wires, you can see. In order to do the assembly, I use the plastic nuts, like you can see here. That will give me the distance from the flight controller board. And on top of the flight controller board, because the VTX is supporting these two holes, 30 millimeters distant holes, I'm planning to put it on top, like this. Nice. And to put these plastic nuts to secure it. Like this and like this. This is the best way to mount the VTX, since this side of the VTX has the LEDs that will give you information about the power, about the channel selected, etc. So guys, I mounted the VTX. It will look like this. I think it will be good. It has like nice clearance from the flight controller board. The next thing is to connect the camera to this connector. I already mounted the camera inside the upper part of the frame. As you can see, it looks like this. The lens is a little bit protruding outside of the frame since the camera is quite large, but it fits nicely, and I think there will be no problems during the flight, and I will see how it will behave during the crash, and I hope it will not damage the lens. Nice. Now the VTX is mounted, the camera is mounted, and I just need to find a place where to mount the receiver. I already planned that I will mount the receiver antennas on the arms using zip ties. So okay guys, as I said, I will probably, this is maybe not the end solution, but probably I will, oh, it's stuck pretty good. I will put the receiver on top of the VTX like this. Just put some double-sided sticky tape underneath the receiver and stick it on top of the VTX. Something like this. I just want to mention that I don't really like this type of screws. Because during the crash or I don't know, like during the flight maybe the battery can be damaged by the head, because this head, as you can see, it's not rounded, and the battery is laying directly underneath the bottom plate, and during the crash or during the landing maybe the battery can be damaged by these screws. I chosen these screws because they are quite longer than the rounded head. But never mind, I will use this rounded head. If I will have the option to change them for the longer, I will change, but for now the build will be based on these screws. So generally I'm gonna change all of these screws and try to fix the VTX on top. And I almost forgot, I need to put the Velcro underneath the frame. So I need to remove these screws first. Because the sides of the frame, they are quite sharp. I suggest to use some kind of file. You can use that file that women are using for their nails. And try to file the edges, especially these edges where the Velcro will go in. Because during the flight, or if you are using one Velcro for a longer time, sometimes Velcro can be cutted by the sharp edges and the battery can fall off during the flight. So guys, we are coming to an end of this build. As you can see, I put the Velcro strap underneath the quad. Also I changed the screws for this like rounded head, and inserted different spacers like this one, plastic black. Now everything looks much better, and also with this quad came battery protection plate, like piece of carbon fiber like this, 2 landing pads, 3M like thick sponge landing pads, and one battery like rubber that will prevent the battery from slipping during the flight. I have just one rubber sheet which should be glued to the battery protection plate, since it has this sticky 3M side. But I want sometimes not to use this battery protection plate at all, so I will need a piece of this rubber on a battery protection plate and on also on the frame. So I'm planning to cut this in 3 pieces. I'm planning to cut this rubber sheet in 3 pieces, cut it here and cut it here, stick this middle part that I cut, stick it underneath the frame, so in this position, and the leftover rubber sheet I'm gonna stick here on the battery protection plate. So let's do that. Let's just take a measures, like approximately, and cut it here, or just like make the cut and make the cut here. Since this rubber sheet is wider than the let's say it like that. It's not perfect, but it will be good. Since this rubber sheet is wider than the distance between the 2 screws, I just want to put it in between screws. Nice, cut it here and cut it here. That will be perfect. Just use some cloth to clean the carbon fiber from like grease from the fingers, etc. To be able to stick this rubber sheet better to the sticking pretty good. This moment, like to put it like more precisely. Okay. So the battery now can be fitted nicely here without any problem of slipping during the flight or during the landing or a crash. And if you want, you can use this plate, but you don't have to use it now. Okay, now the leftover parts of this rubber sheet, I will put one here and one here, like this. That will be perfect, nice. So that's that. And also you can use this dense, let's say dense foam landing pads. Just unstick this 3M tape and stick them to the bottom of the protection plate. They are sticking very good, very nicely. So this one like this, nice. And other one. To the other side, perfect. And now you can insert the Velcro inside the battery protection plate, and it should look like this at the end. So that's that. Let me try and put the battery inside to see how it will fit. Okay, battery is quite big, quite heavy, like this, and nice. The battery will fit nice below the bottom plate, and this will keep the battery well protected. And of course you can mount the battery with or without this protection plate. Okay, now everything is set. I managed to mount everything on a frame. I want to close frame and then test it for the first time with a battery. And I'm gonna use the smoke stopper that I built by myself. This VTX is great because it comes with a MCX connector. Just like push it inside, like that. And here at the rear side of the frame I have a place where I can put the SMA connector and screw in the antenna. Just let me find the antenna. This antenna is Pagoda from Emax. It will be good just for the test. Unfortunately I don't have the purple antenna. Okay, it's well fitted, nice. There's some problem. The cable, coaxial cable, is very rigid, and I have problems because it's hitting directly the VTX. As you can see, hitting directly the VTX, which is not good, so I need to figure out how to mount the VTX. Okay, I think I found the best solution to mount the VTX. So I rotate it for 180 degrees. Now it's on this side, the MCX connector is in this side and the SMA is on this side, and now it should fit perfectly. Okay, let me now assemble the whole frame and I will try the smoke stopper. Okay, each time before the smoke stopper I like to test the conductivity, or like short circuit between the plus and minus of the battery pads. As you can see, there is no conductivity, there is some probably capacitance, that's why the value on multimeter is rising. Let me see if there is like short connection between plus and the carbon fiber. No. Between minus and carbon fiber, no. And between minus and the antenna coaxial, yeah, there is connection. Well, that's that. Okay, now it's time of the truth, to see what I made, if this thing will work or not. Okay. Whew. This moment is always like very uncertain. Oh, come on. Okay, that's that. I'll leave it like that. Test it once more, just in case. Okay, nothing. Let's see what we made, if there's gonna be smoke or not. Woohoo! It's live! It's working. Great. Perfect. Now let me find a place for the receiver where to put it inside the frame. So the idea of mounting the receiver is to wrap it in this isolation tape. I will leave the button and the LEDs open, not isolated. Okay. Perfect. Like this, and cut a little bit opening here. Nice. Like this. This button I will use to bind the receiver to transmitter. The binding process and the beta flight setup I will do in the next video. Okay, now everything is well isolated. Maybe I'll put one layer more. Don't cover the binding button and the LEDs, because both of them I will use for the binding process. And now put some double-sided tape, and generally I can just like stick it here, and I think it will be good. Just like this. Perfect. Okay, now I need to mount the antennas. I will do that with the zip ties on the arms. So I will use two zip ties. One here at the beginning of the arm. This is the front of the quad. These zip ties, I think I have 4 or 5 millimeters. They are quite strong. In the previous build that I did, I used this method also, and it, I think, seems very, very nice and sturdy, and the antennas are not in the range of the propellers. They are below propellers, and when the quad is flying in this way, the antennas will be under the propellers, and then propeller will not be able to damage the antennas. Okay, this is one zip tie. Let me put another zip tie. Like this. Perfect. And just stick the receiver on top of the VTX. So guys, this is the way I mounted the receiver, and using zip ties for the antennas, just route the antenna underneath like this. This open part is the radiating part. So generally just this part of the whole wire is behaving like antenna, and that part should be open. It should not be closed by the frame or like behind something. That's why I'm going to use the heat shrink to align antenna with the zip tie, and to heat shrink it with the zip tie using this purple heat shrink. Something like this. It should be like this. The heat shrink is longer than the radiating part of the antenna. So just pull the heat shrink on the zip tie and over the radiating part antenna. Check out when the radiating part comes out, put it a little bit inside, to protect it, and that's that. Now I need to use the hot air to shrink this tube. And guys, that's that. This is how I make my receiver antennas. I can cut the rest of the heat shrink. I will not need it. Like that, perfectly. And I can do whatever I like with this piece of antenna. Probably I will connect it with the other antenna and leave it here like hanging. It's no problem. Now I'm gonna do the other side also. Okay, that's that. I assemble the second receiver antenna. And guys, I can declare that this beauty, let's call it happy purple, is born. Yeah, look at it. It's amazing. It's beautiful. At the end, I want to measure it to see how much it weighs. Don't mind the scale. It's not great. So it's 306 grams without battery. Okay. And let's compare it to the Happy Red, the first quad that I built. This one is 424 grams. Let's lose the propellers and the Velcro, it will be like 400 grams. So generally I made progress. I built a 100 gram lighter quad. This one flies great, the Happy Red flies great, but I hope and I believe that the Happy Purple will fly much better. Look at this beauty. So guys, that's that for this build. I hope you enjoy it. I almost forgot before the end, with a Majk 405 flight controller came this low ESR capacitor. I will not mount it immediately, I will not solder it immediately. I just want to check out how this quad behaves in a real world during the test, and if I experience some FPV noise, I will solder this ESR capacitor on the battery pads. In the next video I will do the binding of this receiver with the FR Skytranis QX7, which is my radio that I use. So that's that guys for now. I hope you liked the video, I hope you learned something from this video. I certainly did, and see you next time. As always, happy tech flying, bye.